telling me an athlete can go to their sport, their field, and completely wreck their body, yet they can't smoke a plant for recovery? That's the debate around marijuana in sports right now. Athletes are expected to train nonstop, push through their pain, and recover faster than humanly possible, and stay mentally locked in during all of this. But when some athletes use marijuana to relax, to recover, deal with their stress, suddenly it's a massive controversy. And honestly, does it make sense? Today we're talking about whether or not marijuana should be allowed in sports, why leagues have banned it, what different researchers and writers actually have to say about it, and whether weed is really a performance enhancing drug or whether it's a tool that athletes use to survive their sport. Now, before we go any further, let's be fair. This argument has two sides. Even the writers and researchers I read off of don't fully agree. So people against marijuana in sports argue that athletes should be able to compete completely sober, not impaired at all, and that's understandable. A lot of sports medicines point out that THC, one of the components in marijuana, the psychoactive component, can slow reaction time by milliseconds and affects coordinations and impairs short-term memory. And in sports, where time and milliseconds and all that matters, that can be absolutely disastrous, okay? Nobody wants to go out there and go see a UFC fighter, an NFL player, a race car driver, go out there and compete while high off their ass. And sports organizations agree. The World Anti-Doping Agency has banned marijuana because they believed athletes should be able to be role models and that drugs don't belong in competition. Many traditional sports writers also support that stance, arguing that even if a substance isn't a performance enhancer, it can still affect judgment, and that alone is enough to restrict it. So from that perspective, the ban's about protecting the integrity of a sport. Yet what I found during my time of research is that's only part of the story. Because when you look at sports medicine and biological research, marijuana isn't being used or talked about as a performance enhancer. Rather, it's being talked about as something that interacts with your body, the endocannabinoid system responsible for regulating pain, mood, sleep, appetite, stress. And that's where things get more interesting. You see THC, the psychoactive component, it binds to the central nervous system to reduce pain perception and create a calming effect, that effect that gets you high. But it's also the one that slows your mind down. Yet there's another chemical, CBD. That's a non-psychoactive compound. It's often studied for its anti-inflammatory effects, which can help with muscle recovery and soreness. So instead of improving performance directly, what the research suggests is actually marijuana may be used to help athletes recover in their performance. And that matters because recovery is literally half the job of these athletes. When you look at how training actually works at elite levels, it's constant breakdowns and repairs. Micro tears in your muscles, inflammation, fatigue, and stress on the nervous system. And according to some of the studies I looked at, sleep quality is one of the biggest factors in that recovery cycle. And that's where cannabis comes in again. Research suggests that CBD can improve sleep quality and duration, which affects muscle repair and recovery. Other findings also suggested that anxiety and stress response, which is huge for athletes dealing with pressure, injuries, and performance expectations, can come into play. So in that sense, a lot of the medical writers argue marijuana isn't about giving an edge. Rather, it's about being able to help athletes function normally in their environments under this extreme stress and physical demands. And that connects directly into what real athletes we see in the conversations. Michael Phelps, he isn't brought up because he was enhanced or he was a cheater. Rather, because it highlights how common cannabis is for these elite competitors. Sha'Carri Richardson is a major example. A couple years ago, she was banned and suspended, despite her use of cannabis being led with emotional response to stress. NFL players like Calvin Johnson, Josh Gordon, have publicly criticized league rules, especially when you compare it to how easily painkillers and other medications are allowed. And that leads us to another argument I have. Comparison to traditional medicines. A lot of writers and researchers point out that athletes are often prescribed opioids, anti-inflammatories, or sleep medications for pain and recovery. These substances often carry risk of addiction or long-term dependency. So they argue that though marijuana may present lower risk for alternative I messed that up. It's okay though. I'm going to keep going. So some argue that compared to those, marijuana presents a lower risk alternative for managing similar symptoms like pain, stress, and sleep. And that's where inconsistencies in the argument come in. It's not just is weed good, is weed bad. It's why are we treating this substance differently than the other recovery tools with equal or higher risk. So when you put both sides together, the research overlaps more than it should conflict, because critics focus on the impairment and safety, and they're right. Athletes shouldn't be able to compete under the influence, while supporters of it focus on recovery, mental health, and long-term athletic care. And the research shows possible benefits in those areas. And that's where the argument of the Rogerian argument fits in. Instead of picking a winner, you look at where both sides should already agree. Athletes shouldn't compete impaired, and sports should stay fair. And in the middle ground, we see researchers and writers leaning towards the regulation instead of total prohibition, keeping marijuana banned during competition where impairment matters the most, but also allowing controlled monitored use outside of competition for recovery, sleep, stress management, and injury-related pain. Because based on what I found, marijuana doesn't fit in that high category of performance-enhancing or harmless substance. It sits in the middle ground that sports still hasn't figured out. And that's why the conversation really isn't about whether athletes cheat or should cheat. It's about modern sports rules actually matching modern medicine and science. And right now, that gap's still being debated. It's still being filled and argued. On my side, I believe athletes should be able to smoke it. It helps them with their recovery. It helps them to be better athletes. It doesn't help with their performance overall, but it allows them to maintain that level of performance over a longer period of time rather than juicing up with steroids and getting bigger and better at their sport. And that's my argument on whether or not weed should be in sports.